Welcome to another episode. I always want to say wonderful when I meet my guests. A wonderful interview here at Write and Shine Through Your Words author series, proudly brought to you by Write and Shine Media House. I'm your host, Magriet Potgieter, and I have one incredible guest here. I was just doting, I think is the word, on a front cover of a book. Please introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Okay, well, thank you for having me here. This is so exciting to talk about this wonderful little book of mine. I'm April Goff Brown. I guess I can say I am an author. That was my first book that we'll be talking about today. A grandparent, and so it's a personal story. I spent a long career working in the youth services arena. So anything to deal with young people has always been near and dear to my heart. And I retired from that work 7 years ago. And now I spend my time doing things. I'm involved with doing more writing. I am now creating card decks, and I am a human design specialist. So I do readings around helping people understand who they are designed to be. So it's just a very rich and varied experience. And this that we'll talk about today is one of the most wonderful things that I have ever done, and just love, love, love talking about it. So thank you for having me here.
It's such an honor. And, it takes so much courage, April. I do want to start there to bring a story to life. Like we said before the interview, to write especially children's books. I do think it's very underestimated how challenging it can be and how difficult and complicated it can be. Tell us a little bit about your journey and how you basically had to cut to the core to really get to your message.
I'd be glad to. So the book is, since I can see it on by you, that I'm assuming your viewers will, and so you can see that the grandmother in that picture looks a lot like me, and the little girl in that cover the is my granddaughter Kayla,
Oh,
who is now 20. She's my granddaughter by love. She is the daughter of a former girlfriend of my son, so there isn't any blood between us. But the bond that happened from the time I met her when she was 6 months old was instantaneous.
wow.
And everybody knew that she was mine. Her mother knew that she was mine. I mean, it was just a relationship that was undescribable. And the closeness, and just even when later on, when there were birthdays, and she liked to do crafts, and her grandmother would say, oh, that's going with Nana, that's going with Nana. So people knew in the family that this was a special relationship. And she spent many weekends with us and school weeks and all of that. So one Saturday morning, and I will never forget it, she was maybe, I don't know, between 6 and 8 years old. So she was little. And one day she came out of her room and looked at me and went, Nana, when I'm not here, do you forget about me?
Hmm.
And I was blown away by the depth of the question. And it was, but of course not. And so we did have a little talk about it. And I had asked her, well, when you're not here, do you forget about me? And her answer was no. So that was how it started. That question stayed with me for maybe 8 years. I knew I would write a book on it. I just didn't know what it would be. And the funny thing is, she does not remember asking me that question.
Wow.
All these years later, she's now 20. And so it sat with me, for about 8 years. And I went to a women's retreat one early January of 2021. And we were charged with writing down our one big bodacious goal of the year, and to put in an envelope that would get sent to us a year later.
I love
And
it.
I wrote that I would write this book. And I came
Wow.
home, sat down, and the words flowed. It just flowed. Of course, there were way too many words for a children's book, but it flowed. And that was the beginning of getting this book together. And I immediately set out, I knew nothing about publishing. So we're talking about a real newbie that has a great idea but knows nothing. And
Yes.
I sent it out to a couple of hybrid publishers, and one grabbed it right away. And we went back and forth and back and forth, and I decided I would go with them because I had tried to find the illustrator on my own, and
Yes.
it was disastrous. It
Mm.
really was disastrous. And here they had a stable of artists that I could choose from.
Yes.
So knowing that I needed the artwork and it was personal, like you had said, that it had to be just so. Because I
Yes.
had a vision for this book. I wanted it watercolor. I wanted the image to be us, just like you can see there.
Wow.
And so I'm grateful, although it was an investment, um, it came out just the way I had seen it in my
Yes.
mind.
Yeah.
Just the way.
And it's so, it's so lovely to speak about this. Like I mentioned, Right and Shine is bringing out a book this week, actually, also based on real people, real events, and photos. We actually took photos, to also create the characters. And it makes such a difference for the author, for the words, if the illustrations align as well. I can definitely
Right.
see it's almost like the illustrations. 100% compliment the words in a way as well.
Right. And what is what's interesting is when working with a publisher, and so people authors know this now, and people who would come to you will need to know this, is that you do need to give up some control. You have to
Yeah.
relinquish it because you're the expert and you know what's going to work. And so the first thing that I had to do was cut the words down
Oh,
and bring it down to just the essence of the story.
yes,
And it was, well, this is going to be really hard because what's really important? Um, and then to try to break it up by page so that the illustrator could then do her work.
yes.
And the woman who illustrated it is from St. Louis, Missouri, and she was a retired art teacher with children. So it was nice to have somebody that really, this was a love project for her because it was feeding into what she had done in her career. So that was really wonderful. But it was coming and having to bring it down to the narrowest amount of words, knowing that only so many words can be on a page because the pictures tell the
Yes,
story.
yes,
That's what conveys the emotion. And the feedback that I've gotten is exactly that. And so although the little girl in the story is a little girl in the story, that my grandparents that have grandsons feel the same thing.
yes.
That same emotion is there because it truly is a love story between a grandparent and a grandchild. And that's what I was hoping to get across, and it conveys. And so I was really, really thrilled that I stuck with it.
And April, I just love the idea of you not being the biological grandmother and still you adopted this little girl, in your heart. There's just something incredible with a bond like that. So, my next question would be, who's your ideal reader? Because this isn't just about the love story between a grandparent and a grandchild. It's so much more, actually.
So I think, and it's funny because birth grandparents, and grandchildren have really loved the book. I think there's a couple of things. This came out just in that second year of the COVID pandemic. So grandparents and grandchildren weren't seeing each other. Okay. I was really blessed because mine was coming for school every day because her parents still had jobs that they had to attend to. And I didn't. But the when there's space and distance where they can't get together, there's a loss there. Okay.
Yes,
So COVID brought that loss. But then I realized, grandparents and grandchildren are often at the mercy of the parent, that in between generation. that the parent and grandchild may have a difficult relationship. Something gets said and the relationship breaks apart. And it's a grief. And I'll explain how I really feel this and know this because it did happen with this little child when she became around 12 years old, that her mother and I had a falling out.
Mm.
The child was now at that tween age where attitude comes and the difficulties were coming, and life was not easy for her mom either. And so something happened, and her mother got really furious with me and told me I would never see her again,
Oh,
ever see her again. Well, when her mom came to pick up the Kayla's things that were with me, the pain and the loss that I felt, I will tell you that I cried for a solid month and I couldn't mention her name or think about her without sobbing all over again. I have never, ever known grief
yeah,
that powerful. And I know that this little girl felt the same thing, but she was powerless. We were both powerless to do anything about it. And
yeah.
all I could do was pray that one day she would come back, which she did when she was 16. And I got my first text that said, "Hi, Nana."
Oh,
But that's the other, I think, piece that needs to, for a grandchild to understand as well, is that even though you're out of sight, you're never out of heart. Not the mind, you're never out of heart. And so if children could know that you don't need to be present to be loved. Um, we lost a lot of time. I lost her teenage years because they also moved out of state. And it wasn't until she turned 18 that I saw her. So it was a 6 year break. Um, and I know that other parents and grandparents have that issue. So there's research to show that the damage that's done to the child
yes,
because the parent is angry
yes.
um, is really unfortunate. And yet grandparents don't have the rights to
That's
do anything. So I think that's the other piece that came out larger to me after the book was written.
yes,
Okay,
yes.
that there's a whole segment um, that of families that this can help with, and even with when parents and their transit now with jobs that they move out of state. And so it may not be a bad relationship, but it's just that because of a job, we are moving. And so the grandparent and grandchild don't get to see each other as much anymore. And so to have that book as a reminder to say, I'm always with you, is another reassurance for the child. So
Absolutely.
those are that becomes the emotional story that was bigger than what I wrote.
Oh, I love it so much. And April, this is something, we're on time for Christmas, for any grandparent to bless their, or even a parent, that sees grandparents struggling and not seeing
Right.
the grandchild. Like this would be an ideal gift in children's hands.
Yes, and I agree. I do believe that that is something that they need,
Yeah.
and just to know. And I think there was such a security to to hear that, and what children are getting from their grandparents is that you are always inside my heart,
Oh,
always.
well,
That the memories are what is really, really important here. And someday there'll be a physical hug again.
yes.
But if it's not there, you're not, doesn't mean you're not loved.
Yeah, I get quite emotional. It's very, very sad. Our children miss out because I remember my grandparents both passed away when I was 13, both in the same year. But they made such an impact on my life. My grandmother was so loving and kind. And it's interesting how I still carry, all these years later, carry their words and their love in me. I knew I was adored by them. So this is actually a
Yeah.
very emotional book overall because it does evoke that emotion.
Does. And I'm glad to hear that, because the relationship between a grandparent and grandchild is
Yeah.
very different. That until you're a grandparent, you can't know that kind of love, it's different. It's hard to explain until you've experienced it. But the first time you take a look at that grandchild, whether it's at birth, and that this relationship evolved over time, she didn't have to be born for me to feel this, is that there is you don't have the responsibility of raising the child. We don't have to teach all the stuff and
Yeah.
the daily life, that we can come in and provide that additional support. Yes, we can support the parents in making sure that they're following the values and so on that the parents want to have in place. And sometimes, even now, my current 11-year-old granddaughter, she's got a lot on her mind.
Mm.
And I'm her safe place where she can
Oh,
just the other day she just let loose on a whole lot of stuff, and it's like, well, hello to you on a Monday afternoon.
yeah.
But she felt better because she knew it was a safe place, and yeah, and she knows how much I love her parents. Well, and she does too, but she needed to let it out. And
Yeah.
so there's that benefit that a grandparent can do
Wonderful.
and be for it. So it ends up being a bigger it's just a bigger story than I ever intended. All I wanted to do was put out there for my little Kayla, that I loved her immensely, and she was not forgotten. And whether she ever saw it or not, it was there.
Yeah.
And it's really funny is because the little girl in the book while she looks like Kayla, she's a blend of my Kayla and Olivia, my 11-year-old granddaughter. And the name I chose for the book, talk about personal. My son has always wanted a daughter named Zoe.
Ah,
And so that's
sweet.
how the name came about. So everything about the book is
Yes.
personal.
Oh, that's the best stories. And I love you sharing that. It's the most beautiful love letter to your grandchildren ever. I think it's incredible, but also what an incredible tool for grandparents. You got me very nostalgic here about my grandmother. I was also adopted, and
Okay.
but I know, I was a grandchild. I had a name.
Yeah.
We had just also this incredible bond, and I still feel we do, no matter if he's not physically on earth anymore or not. We'll always love each other. And it is a very, very strong bond, no matter time, space, nothing. I mean, I'm almost 50 and I lost her when I was 13 physically, but she's still here. She's still here.
And it's nice to hear that, reassuring, because that's what my friends would tell me. No, she'll come back, don't worry. But
Yes.
I was so afraid that I'd lost her forever,
Mhm.
and so it's something that I learned is called ambiguous grief.
Wow.
Okay, where it's the grandchild is present and still alive, but the absence is felt. And I think that that is a grief that the child feels. And I think it's also that when a child feels that when the parents split and
Yes.
the oftentimes with the mother and the father is now gone. So that it's an ambiguous grief is, well, how come I can't see them? How come they won't call me? How come they won't come visit me? And that's, I think, what we need to really pay attention to, that we have to get out of our adultness and really pay attention to the child's needs, because those have to come first. Because as you said, that feeling is always there, always.
And it's a bond. You can't
Yeah.
explain it. You can't, it's just a love, like this absolute unconditional love. I remember in detail times I've spent with my grandma, and I'll forever treasure that time with her. She was also always very good to other people. I wrote so many letters to her and she wrote me back. So I do feel that's where my writing career actually started. So
Wow.
we should never underestimate the role grandparents, whether it's biological or not, have in a person's life overall.
It's funny you say that, because when I went to college, my grandmother would send me letters. She and I wrote. And whenever she sent me a letter, she always sent me a stamp wrapped in some waxed paper so that I would write her back.
Oh, that is so
And
sweet.
I have in my possession, I still have one letter from her, that comes back from 1972. So I've still got it because I had asked her where her parents were from, and it's the only documentation that I have about her parents who emigrated here from Poland.
Wow.
So it was, it's a real special. And I would recognize her handwriting anywhere because it's very old world.
Yeah.
But to have that, it's something that no other sibling has of mine, is that there's just that connection. So, yeah, those days are changed now with all the emails and texts,
Yeah.
but to have those letters from her,
And now the cool grandmothers write books for their granddaughters. I think
I love it.
that's
Yes,
incredible.
I love it. I just moved it to the next level. That's
You
all.
did. You
Yeah.
100% did. What was her reaction? Did you see her, see the book, or what did she tell you about the book? Did she read it?
She did. I mailed it to her because she lives
Oh,
quite a distance away. And she absolutely loved it. She got the first copy.
wow. Oh,
So
so
the first
special.
copy went to her. The second copy went to my now 11-year-old granddaughter. But she loved it, and I know it's with her.
Yeah,
I
it's
know it's with her.
beautiful. It is so special. April, for anyone, out there going through a tough time with a big word you taught me, ambiguous grief. I hope I say it correct. What advice would you give to our listeners?
In relation to the grandparent grandchild or the book?
I would say with the relationship that you're mourning,
Okay.
that you lost without choosing to lose it.
Right. Um, there is support. I didn't realize that there was, and so I think it would be to find that, because there is comfort in that. And also that there may be grandparents who'd lost a grandchild for a while, but has come back. And just to know that if you've got the bond, if you've established it, that child is going to feel it always in the heart. And when they can, they will come back. I really do believe that they will come back. She did when she was able to, at 16, 17 years of age, because in the state where she lives, she had more control over her life. And so they do come back. Um, but the pain, it just takes time for the pain to kind of heal, just like it's because it's a death in
Yeah.
some ways,
Mm.
just like getting over the death of your grandmother, because she's passed, or somebody who you've lost. In my case, my parents. It does take time to heal, and the pain lessens, but that child will always be there, with you. And so I at first took the pictures out, and then I was like, no, I put the pictures back, and there's a picture of her that will remain at my bedside. No matter how big she gets, it's this one picture that is there because the day was special, and that's how I remember her.
Oh, it's
Um,
gorgeous.
so yeah, it is painful, but the child will return, um, in some way, somehow, especially in the days of social media,
Yes. Yes.
especially because at some point they're going to have a social media page,
Mm.
and you can reach out and see, if they want to make contact again, because you will never know what they were told
Yes.
either.
Yes. That's I
Never know
think
what they
that's
were
the
told.
challenge.
Yeah,
Definitely. And
yeah,
it's just so unfair. I also wrote a book for single moms about, how you don't have I think the word that I used was I don't have the right to withhold my son from his grandparents or even his father, no matter what they do or say, or it's not my
right,
place to make those decisions for him. So I've always honored his grandparents in terms of they are a part of his life. Like it's not my place to make big decisions like that. And
right,
it wasn't always
right.
easy, but I do feel I did right by my son to go into, to really make a decision like this from day one, actually.
Yeah, yeah, and that's great because we have to put the children first
Yes.
and their
That's the
emotional
thing.
well-being.
Hundred
Yes.
percent,
Yes.
100%. And I do feel like it was so good for him overall. If I see how good he gets along with his niece and nephews, and like it's good. I'm really glad I made the choice, but it was a choice that I made. He's not going to be like in a chess set between me and his father. If me and his we don't get along, but it doesn't mean this my son has to be in the middle of our
Right.
changes with each other. Oh,
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly. And I've seen in my family where the parents did what they could to put the child first and how adjusted that he
yes.
became. I've seen where another one, it was very contentious and what a challenge and how emotionally hurt the children were.
Yes,
And in some cases, lifelong,
yes,
lifelong hurt.
ex-
But we really do need to put our adult hurts aside and we took the responsibility of being a parent, and it's important that we put the child first and where the grandparents are involved to make sure that that relationship can continue, because the grandparent can be the biggest supporter of the parent as well.
exactly, exactly.
Biggest.
That's
Yeah.
a whole nother topic for me,
Right.
but it's a tough one. If I think for me it was just always to keep my son above. It's always about my son. So it's like, to keep your side clean, especially towards your child, so that my son
Right.
has to go, why did you do this? Why did you decide this? On like no one gave you the
Yeah.
right type of thing at the end
Right.
of the day.
Right.
And it's almost to keep him hostage in a way, if you look at withholding him from people that he might, that could be very good to him emotionally as well.
Right, right. I hear you. So there's lots of stories out there that we all have inside of us.
Yes,
If we can find a way to, it's got to flow.
ex-
I had attempted to write this book several times, and finally it flowed. The timing was right, but we all have the stories within us. It's just sit down and begin to do it and understand what it is. It can't be about a grievance. Okay, this was not about a
exactly.
grievance at all. It's really about the emotional experience, the emotional love, the emotional gift that you want to give into the world, to help somebody else.
Yes.
I think can be the most powerful of all books.
That is beautiful. And I absolutely cannot wait for your second one after this one, because this is such a special one. I do think, I think any child that went through any type of change in their life, grandparents are that stability to a lot of children. And I think sometimes underrated almost, how much a grandparent or even a figure that represents a grandparent can mean to a child that is going
Right,
through a tough time.
right, right. Same. We had a neighbor next door that was grandparent age, and they were like adopted grandparents for my son when we moved here. Um, and there can be many of them. I think that family, is very differently defined
Yes.
nowadays. And if we define it by love, and I think children can have not have too many people who love them.
I love that
Okay.
so much.
They
Yes.
just, yeah, they need it. They need it. They thrive on it. And
Exactly.
it helps them become, amazing, amazing people in their own right. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. And
So,
especially words that you use like safe spaces. And, it's very rare. And that is why it's so important for children to know they have these adults no matter what. Like it's not conditional. There's no conditions on these relationships. And it's just
right,
built on love, which is beautiful.
right, right. I hear you. Unconditional love all the way.
100%.
Yeah.
April, if anyone wants to reach out to you, how can they find you on social media and how can they get their hands on this book of yours?
Okay, so right now the books are only available through me. So the best way is my website or the Facebook. So first, my website is aprilgoffbrown.com. If they click on the button that says shop, it'll take them to the shop and my book is there. So
Amazing.
that is how they could buy the book directly. Um, my Facebook page is also April Goff Brown. And if somebody messages me through Facebook on Messenger, I will get back to them and tell them how they can get the book. It can be autographed and it can be autographed to the grandparent or the grandchild. So they just have to let me know that as well. And it will get sent out within a few days. So, but that's the way to get it right now.
Oh, absolutely stunning. Thank you so much for coming to visit me today and also
It
for
was my
sharing
pleasure.
your story. I just have so much respect for you and also this beautiful bond
Thank you.
that you have with your grandchildren. Thank you so much. And also
Thank you.
you who joined in, if you are going through a tough time, especially now before we are entering Christmas, just know that, when you go through time of grief, it's not easy. I think that's the message. You have to, in a way, cope with things that you didn't choose, but just know that bond never, never, like I get emotional now, that bond will never go away no matter what. And, with this incredible book, The Hug That Stays in Your Heart, it's just such a heartwarming reminder. I do really recommend you maybe reaching out to April, getting this book into your grandchildren's hand or even in your own hand. And like me, if I miss my grandparents, so maybe that's something also to consider. But if you are going through a tough time, just know you are not alone and that you are also in someone's heart. There is a hug on your heart and keep on shining and keep on writing.
Just watch me shine.